I would like for you to tell us a little bit more about the space you're in and how did you go about choosing your niche, and who, when you talk about niche, who do you focus on in your practice?
My niche client is the woman who is dealing with infertility issues, whatever stage of process that might be. I also work with women who are in the perinatal phase, so they're either pregnant and expecting, or they're in their postpartum phase. There's a lot of maternal mental health work that gets done. And I also see just the average woman who is struggling with anything that all of us at some point or the other, all of us women at some point or the other struggle with, just by the woman's experience, right? Living the woman's experience, so be it anxiety, depression, stress, which is a really big one. We manage so many different roles on a very regular basis, and sometimes they all just come clashing, and then we're left wanting. And my whole approach is to holistically bring you to wellness. Um, I fell into this space. I had to take coaching when I decided that I was going to open up. I was going to start my practice, and for the longest time, I thought I would be working with children because this is what my the bulk of my experience is. And I remember sitting in session with my coach one day, and she's like, "When you speak about your own journey, your own infertility journey, there is a lightness to you. You light up." And so she felt that I needed to tease the idea, just court it, see how you do. And I sat down and I gave it some thought. I won't lie, imposter syndrome was the biggest thing. But I remembered very quickly my own journey and how I had come to the space where I felt I needed someone to support me. um, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find a therapist who looked like me. I couldn't find a therapist who could come with the cultural sensitivity that I needed, right? I needed for you to understand the nuances of my culture and how it was affecting my infertility journey. And I couldn't find anyone that fit that bill. So if I'm venturing into practice and I'm light and I light up when I speak about this, then perhaps this is the space that I should be occupying. And I have not regretted that decision, not one day since. I can be for people who I was looking for someone to be for me. And I tell it to a number of my clients when we do the intake that I get it to some degree, right? All those things that I was hoping for and wishing for, these are the things that I try to provide in service and supports to my clients. So, who's my ideal client? You. If you are struggling currently, you're on your own infertility journey or your fertility journey. That's really the way I look at it. It's a fertility journey. Again, it does not matter at what stage in the journey you're at. If you are currently pregnant, your career woman who's starting out her family, um, or you even already have children, right? And you're adding to your family, or you are done with the kids, and you are in this postpartum phase and trying to navigate what new life looks like. Or you're just the average woman, and you have some interpersonal, interrelational issues, career problems, you're having issues at work, you're having to deal with anxiety, depression, just stress. You're my ideal client. I would love to work with you.
Thank you. And while you were speaking, let's see. So I haven't talked about this very much, but when it comes to postpartum, I had a very difficult journey myself. When it I had during the pregnancy was good, but afterwards a lot happened, and I struggled a lot with thinking, okay, maybe I'm supposed to be over this by now. I should already be feeling better, and I put all that pressure on myself, only to realize there is no real schedule. Like, you don't just get better overnight. And yes, you have to be there for others, but at that vulnerable time, you need somebody to be there for you. You are the
Mhm.
one needing that support. And for me, that was a very difficult transition because I'm usually the strong one and the one who can handle it all. At that point, if somebody said a superwoman, I'd be like, yeah, I guess I'm a superwoman. But after having gone through that experience, I shun anything superwoman because that's nothing to be proud of, having to deal with all those things.
Absolutely.
And especially if you don't have the help. So I remember me looking for someone to work with. And for me, when you said social, no, was it cultural
Cultural
sensitivities?
sensitivity.
That was a big one for me because I am from the Caribbean. Some of the things I dealt with post having a baby, it has, some cultural
Mhm.
stuff to it had to do with our culture, some of it. Um, the person that I became after giving birth, like that was new for me. Like
There's a
how much you
shift.
change,
Hmm.
yes. And being the strong one, I think, and now being the one needing help and support and feeling so vulnerable. I've never felt that vulnerable in my life. So for me, reaching out to someone, speaking with someone was huge. And I'm glad that I've done that. I've gone through I met with many therapists since then. Before that, I had
Hmm.
never met with a therapist before, but since having gone through that experience, I would encourage anybody to do it. So someone like you providing that service, I'm just so glad there are people like you doing that because we need it.
We do. There is absolutely two things, two takeaways from what you just said. Absolutely no schedule. That's not what the books say, right? But absolutely, because the perinatal phase, by definition, stretches until 1 year after you give birth. So at this point, your child is one. But your child is one, and he or she's still hitting milestones, right? At 1 years old, there might not really be speaking. Like there's several shifts that we go through as our kids are hitting these milestones. There is absolutely no hard stop, right? You're in postpartum phase for 6 weeks, you're in postpartum phase for a year, having to very quickly get ourselves together to go back to work, because most of us are working, is what makes it a little tricky to navigate, because all of a sudden you're feeling, well, the government is saying I'm okay enough to go back to work, or my job is saying that I'm okay enough to go back to work. I should probably be out of this postpartum phase. There's a lot of women who develop PPD a lot later. Um, it sometimes a little over a year, right? It doesn't always materialize in those first 2 or 3 weeks after the baby is born. That's not everybody's story. So absolutely, there's really no timeline, and the struggle is different. It's different for every single person. We're all struggling collectively, and what your struggle looks like might be a little different from mine. But you're absolutely right. There are certain cultural, religious. I find that there are also, like, religion plays a part, nuances, and you want to work with somebody who gets it, right? So that when you're saying it, you're not now having to pause and explain why this is a thing. This is a thing because it is a thing. You just need to get it. Again, so that was something that was important, and as you said, like for yourself as well, like finding someone who gets it. Um,
And for someone who is not sure yet if they should get therapy now, like what would you tell them? What would you tell someone who, let me put it this way. So I've known people who you can tell they need therapy, but there's this stigma around therapy, or there is the thing that I know I've heard before. It gets worse. Like talking to this person, like how does that really help me? And I have now to go through all of my childhood trauma, and I'm bringing all of this up, and this is just too much for me to handle right now. So I'm just not going to go. What would you tell that person?
I would say two things are important, right? You have to be prepared. When you come into a space like this, you have to be prepared for the way it's going to bend and flex you. So it's important that you're ready to undertake the process. But I think it's equally important to do that thing that some of us do. Not everybody goes to the pool and just dives into the deep end, right? Some of us start from the steps and we do one step, two steps, three steps. Now our knees are in the water, four steps, five steps. Sometimes that's also equally important. If you're absolutely not prepared, start to fish out, do a little fishing, right? Just look at people's faces. A lot of us have websites. A lot of us have profiles on a lot of these directories. Look at people's faces. See who's calling to you. Look at the work that the people are doing, right? Look and try to just feel it out. Make a call. No one's binding you to anybody, right? Speak to people. Those consultations for me are so important because I need you to hear my voice. I need you to get a feel of what working with me will be like. And also, like I had stated, for me, it's not traditional therapy. I have moved away from the pathologizing first model, because there are a lot of people that I work with who don't need the pathologizing. They don't need a stamp of general anxiety disorder. Now, if that's you, then that's you. But for a lot of us, it's this adjustment. We sit in this space where it's a lot of things that are moving and we need to adjust, and we're not always able to do that 100% effectively. And so it's working with you to get yourself into realignment. And I don't necessarily believe that that always takes pathologizing, right? You might not have major depressive disorder. PPD is real. People do have that. People do experience that. PPA is also quite real. Postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression. These things are real. But it might not be you. And if it's not you, then there's no need to carry a label. And when you go the traditional route, you have to have a diagnosis, blah, 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 blah. So again, it's not one size fits all, and it's not one specialist, a therapist fits all either. The fact that I might know someone who worked great for me might not necessarily mean that he or she will work great for you. So feel people out, do a lot of reading, just look up people's profiles, look at their websites. If something pulls you, I strongly believe in like these gut reactions. If something pulls you on the website or something about the way the person look calls to you, make that call. See, then speak to them, right? Because I might look really good, but not sound. Auras are really important. Some people gel and some people don't. So take your time, work your nerve up, because you have to be ready when you submit to the process. But also, while you're doing that, feel people out and see how things are.
And can you talk a little bit more about talk therapy? Because I know when I was going through the process of finding a therapist, it was like, do you want talk therapy, or I don't know
So
what
there
else
are
they use.
various modalities that people employ. Because of my training, I'm quite eclectic. There are certain things that I fall back on. It's all talk therapy when you sit in front of a person, and what you do for the most part is speak. You talk through and you process that way. Um, when you write down stuff by journaling, that's journaling. So the effects are almost the same, except the modality is what's different, right? So that's what talk therapy is. It's just sitting down and having a conversation. That way you declutter your mind and you have forward progress when it comes to processing. Now, the modalities, the ways by which they will get you to this mental clarity or attaining your goals, those are different. You can have someone who does EMDR, or you can have someone who uses cognitive behavior therapy, or dialectical behavior therapy, or emotional focus therapy, or solutions based therapy, or there's a whole lot of the modalities are a lot, and people are trained. You can have people whose training is in like grief counseling. So it's big. It's a very big world. And depending on your training, you may or may not ascribe to one or another modality. But at the end of the day, most people are sitting people down, and they're having a conversation with them. And that's what, and through your conversation, certain questions are asked that have you process. You might have certain assignments that you'll do outside of the space. But for the
Mhm.
most part, that's what that is.
Okay. And I know I've heard where people say, "Oh, your therapist made you do that." Now that you're going to therapy, you're different, or
Yeah.
You're saying things that I've never heard you say before.
And I'm glad.
So, what would you say about around that?
I'm glad. I'm glad because what that means is that whatever it is that needs processing is being processed, right? When you go through certain processes, you go through certain experiences, you're supposed to grow, right? Stagnancy is a problem. When you submit yourself to school, you don't stay in kindergarten forever. You go from first to second, and next thing you know, you got a college degree. You're supposed to grow through processes. You're supposed to grow through experiences. You're supposed to grow through situations. And there is absolutely nothing different when you submit yourself to a therapeutic process or a clinical process. You're supposed to grow. You're supposed to grow in the sense that you do a lot of processing, right? And in doing a lot of processing, you get to, I love this word alignment. You get to realign yourself. You get to reevaluate your values, and you get to choose, this works for me, this doesn't work for me. I was taught this when I was 5 years old. It no longer serves me, so out the window with it. I realign myself. I reevaluate my values. I choose what I want. I realign myself with my purpose. I'm different. You shed that shell, you're supposed to come out a little different, not unrecognizable, which happens in some cases, right? Some people need to come out a completely different person. But I am glad if you're hearing that, because you went to therapy, you're looking a little different, you're sounding a little different. Yes.
Yeah, or because you went to therapy, now you're saying you don't want to do this anymore, or you've made this
Yes,
big life change to
boundaries.
leave
Yes, because you
where
are
you're at.
learning to love yourself and you are
Hmm.
reevaluating the structures that make up your life. You're reevaluating the boundaries. You're reevaluating certain relationships. You're reevaluating certain people in your life. You're supposed to do all of these things if, well, if that's where you're at. But if you're hearing it, you know, life in and of itself is a journey. And there are some people who have 3 or 4 chapters. Some people have one page in one chapter, right? Not everyone's meant to come along with you. When you, again, you submit yourself to certain processes, when you get to relearn who you are, when you get to tap into the very essence of you, which will happen if you completely surrender to the process, people will fall off because they no longer listen. They just no longer are worthy of the space that you are in. And it might not even be that drastic. It might really just be that you learned that you outgrew certain people a very, very long time ago. And then by learning to establish healthy boundaries, you shifted, and the people just couldn't shift alongside with you. There's nothing wrong with that.
And you say boundaries. People who are not in therapy or who are opposed to therapy do not like that word for the most part.
No, it's quite hard, right?
Yeah.
It's quite difficult. And I was telling a client, like, you're setting this boundary. Who do you think you're setting it for? You're not, you don't. So I cannot set a boundary for you because you can decide to not adhere to it. You set the boundaries for yourself.
Hmm.
I'm not going to let this person X, Y, and Z. So I put the line right here. Now, whether or not they do what I'm asking or accept what the new terms are, the line is here. It's either you can come along with me or this is where we fork. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So yeah, I know that people say, "Oh, I need to set boundaries with this person." Okay, you might set boundaries for the rules of engagement with that person, but you can't set a boundary for the next person. They set
And
their boundaries, you set yours. You either
mhm.
respect their boundaries and they respect yours, or you both just don't.
Yeah, and there's nothing easy about any of this, of course.
No.
But it's necessary. So yeah. One last question for you. What should I be asking my therapist when I'm trying to figure out whether I should work with them or not?
Oh, there's a ton of questions. Anything and everything that you could possibly think of, from do they accept your insurance to are they private pay. You are allowed to ask about their fee structure. You are allowed to ask about the way they schedule. You are allowed to ask about who their ideal client is. You are allowed to ask about their experiences as a clinician. Um, the world is your oyster. You are allowed to ask, um, like, successes, right? Um, how many people have they graduated? Do they often graduate? How do they terminate with their clients? Are they coming to graduations or are people falling off? When I sit in consultation, I tell a prospective client, please ask. You're allowed to ask about their education. I say, ask. If you ask me a question that I feel is too private, I will tell you. Other than that, ask me whatever it is that you feel you need to know that will help you make the decision as to whether or not I am best fit for you. Ask, because trust and believe me, I'm asking the exact same questions back, because it's a dual relationship. It's two ways. It's not just you interviewing your um, clinician, it's the clinician interviewing you as well. So ask, and if you ask a question that to them seems taboo, they'll let you know that this is not something that they're able to answer. And then you just back away from that.
Well, thank you so much. Bye.
You're welcome.